My grandparents had 4 very different end-of-life experiences. Although death is never easy, and I'm often reminded of their absence in my work with older adults, each loss has taught me something about what a good death is. Granddad had a slow decline with dementia. My Nan was a fierce advocate, honoring Granddad's wish to stay in their home, perhaps at the detriment of her own retirement experience. After almost 5 decades as a nurse, she did eventually acquiesce to bringing in reinforcements through a home care service. Granddad was a real character, which did not diminish throughout his cognitive decline. He would save comic strips for the different grandkids, instructing us to grab them out from under one of the kitschy fridge magnets collected during their years of travel. It was always intriguing to cipher what he was trying to tell us about ourselves through his weekly selections. His last comic for me was about a hairless cat who dreamed of becoming a dolphin. I like to think that was his nod of approval for his imaginative granddaughter with ever-changing hair color. My Nan and Granddad's steadfast refusal to consider long-term care made me question why it was such an undesirable final home. Around that time, I started volunteering with art groups for older adults living with dementia. Motivated in part by their criticism of long-term care as sterile, depersonalizing, and depressing, I went on to work as an art therapist in long-term care for almost 5 years and loved seeing how residents with dementia, mobility challenges, and other chronic health conditions expressed themselves and made connections through creativity. My grandpa was a giant man, which earned him the nickname Tiny. At 6'5", his size made it increasingly challenging for my physically frail grandma to assist with his daily care after a broken ankle just wouldn't heal, limiting his mobility in combination with visual impairment due to glaucoma and later macular degeneration. A series of falls landed him in hospital. During a bout of delirium, he slid off his hospital bed. Although approximately 4 feet isn't very far to fall, he broke his hip, requiring an even longer hospital stay. Without frequent eye injections to maintain what remained of his vision to read, a favorite pastime, his cognition rapidly declined. We were shocked to learn that his care plan did not mention visual impairment. It was only after several visits noticing his meal trays had not been touched that my family realized staff must have been putting the tray down and leaving immediately without removing those tight plastic lids from the little food dishes, or cueing my grandpa by placing the utensil in his hand. Needless to say, my grandma, my dad, an uncle, or an aunt was there for every meal after that. At long last, he was stable enough to transfer to long-term care, where he had a peaceful private room to listen to sports on his own TV and dote on the resident cat. A few weeks later, the cat would not leave Grandpa's side when it was his time to go. A hobby farmer and lifelong animal lover, I think my grandpa was comforted immensely to have his death presided over by his feline companion. My Nan's death was truly traumatic. Her major wish was not to die in hospital. Years as an OR nurse left her weary of the treatment of elderly patients. Unfortunately, her suspicions were correct. After my granddad's death, she moved into an apartment and continued her quest to age in place. Years elapsed, and she was pretty stable and independent with the unyielding support of my mom. Choosing to live with risk, she persevered on her own with deteriorating vision and a laundry list of self-managed comorbid conditions. One night, she had a fall while getting out of bed. Although her concerns were initially dismissed, plagued by unbearable pain, she refused to leave the hospital without further assessment. Osteoporosis turned a slow slip to the floor into a severed spine. She spent the end of her life being shuffled from room to room in a chaotic and overcrowded hospital. Our resolute matriarch, the kind of woman who never left home without a spritz of Chanel No. 5 and a brooch to perfectly match her outfit, was propped up in an acrid 4-bed room with a constant stream of strangers, and worst of all, her dentures had been removed. She would have hated to see herself like this. I was a recreation and volunteer coordinator at a long-term care home at this time and spent many afternoons giving residents manicures, so it was the least I could do for my own Nan. She died in an opioid-induced comatose state, finally comfortable after a long and drawn-out battle for dignity. I now wear her wedding ring on my hand, and it helps remind me of her glamour and the joyful person she was with Granddad. On the opposite end of the spectrum, my grandma got her dream death. As odd as that sounds, when confronted by a diagnosis of stage 4 emphysema, she didn't know exactly how long she'd have, but she was adamant she would die peacefully in the comfort of her own home. Months elapsed, and she started to slow down. Her world shrunk to the 4 main rooms of the top floor of her home, and she did not apologize for becoming the family beacon. If you wanted to see Grandma, you go to her. When we announced our engagement, she was so excited for the first of her grandchildren to get married, but in her deadpan way, immediately let me know she would probably not be alive to attend my wedding. She continued to decline, and a hospice bed was brought into her living room. It was beautiful to see her retirement-aged children gather around her. This selfless person who was so devoted to her family lovingly accepted the care her children wanted to reciprocate. My dad, her eldest son, was committed to seeing her through this final transition. It was inspiring to witness, and I hope to give back to my parents like that when it's their time. Being together in her living room, the place of many raucous afternoon visits over a cup of coffee or a can of ginger ale, was the perfect way to see her out of this life. There's no one-size-fits-all for a good death. But in my experience, death is a transition made easier through advanced care planning, communication, and collaboration between formal caregivers, kin, and of course, the person dying. I miss my grandparents and still find myself overcome by waves of grief unexpectedly. Their deaths have left an indelible imprint on my life, and have sparked ongoing discussions of wishes with my parents and with my partner, for which I am grateful. There's a sense of comfort knowing what they want, that it might change, and that we are unafraid to face it together.